the promised Pomuland. I leaned back in my chair and stretched, a long yawn escaping from between my lips. While the chair squeaked audibly, it was my lower back that screamed silently. I'd been sitting at the desk for 3 hours now without any movement. The sides of my hips were numb, and the time was already weighing heavily on my eyelids. There was a low hum permeating my senses. The computer to my side was stressed to its limits. The softly glowing lights inside its case painted the room in ever-changing shades of red, blue, and green. It had already spent the evening alongside me, both of us lost in a world of blocks. Now, as I stare into the screen, I'm met with nothing but darkness and an inventory filled with dirt. It was my first time playing Shovel Forge, and I'd made the most basic of mistakes. Gifted with an iron pickaxe, I decided to head straight down beneath the earth, sure that I'd be able to find my way back to the surface. It's a child's game. How hard could it be? How much time had passed since that pickaxe had broken? It left me buried alive, food slowly draining as I pounded endlessly on the soil with my bare fists. Another sound harmonized with the groan of the computer. My real stomach begged me to find some food made of more than pixels and blocks. Ignoring it, I leant forward once more and returned to the darkness. The task was all-consuming. Each block of dirt I removed felt the same as the last. Everyone else had already left the game, their own progress measured in houses and diamonds. Meanwhile, I stubbornly refused to log off. Either I would reach the surface or run out of food and respawn at the top. No matter the case, I would finally bring an end to my Sisyphean task. A spark appeared in the abyss. Small at first. A tiny grey block in the black that consumed me. It was moving from side to side, like a firefly without purpose, bobbing and weaving freely. In silence, I studied this light, its glow growing inside with each pair of blocks I managed to dig through. At first, it was just a pixel, but now it had become the size of a block. Finally removed from the monotony of darkness, I focused my efforts on finding that light. Soon, I was able to make out the rough shape of letters. With just a few more steps, I would discover who my guiding light was. A sound pulled me out of my trance, and the flashing of my heart alerted me to the damage I was now suffering from starvation. Click. Click. My time was running out. That soft sound counting down my ever-draining hearts. I'd only looked away for a moment, but when my eyes were drawn back to the letters above, I was able to read them clearly. Pomu. I thought that everyone had logged off, but here was the fairy just as deep underground as me. We hadn't interacted much yet, but I knew she wouldn't mind me asking for some help in the game. The only problem was that I didn't actually know how to type in Shovel Forge. Cursing, I minimized the game and quickly making a call. One more click rang out. Another half-heart lost to hunger before the dial tone fell silent. I waited there for a moment, scared to speak at first, until another click spurred me forward. Pomu? Are you in Shovel Forge right now? I asked, bringing the game back to full screen. There was no response at first. Had I left my microphone muted? I pressed Alt and Tab to minimize the game, but once more was left staring at my draining hearts. Had it crashed? Now of all times when I finally saw an end to my suffering? Sighing, I resigned myself to my fate. Another click brings me closer to the inevitable demise. A flash of light almost blinded me. The monitor suddenly burned like a beacon. Having adjusted to the darkness, it took me a moment to see the bright colors that now enveloped my screen. Gold and green flooded my vision, as well as two burning embers. The red eyes of Pomu now staring right at me. "Chan, you need some help?" she asked, bright as her avatar. The voice made me jump a little, the silence of the game having only been broken by the clicking of my health for the last minute or so. "Oh, Pomu, can you hear me?" Silence again. She took a few steps backwards, her avatar glitching slightly in the dark. She carried a torch, but there seemed to be some sort of graphical error on my end. The dirt around us was finally visible, my prison revealed in all its dreary glory, but the fairy avatar in front of me would flash red and black at random. The dull groan of my PC from earlier may have been a warning that it too was at its limit. I tore my eyes from my savior to look at my CPU. I'd never encountered a crash like this before. The whole case had gone dark, Fans still spinning and components still humming, but the RGB that normally lit the insides had faded. Might be time to unplug, I conceded, finally giving up on the game. My help comes at a price. Pomu's eyes were all that I saw when I returned to the PC screen. 2 crimson dots burned into me, the only color on the otherwise pale screen. I tried to take a step back, but found my character could no longer move. I'm sure if you can hear me, but my game seems to be glitching. Testing the mouse, I found that I couldn't even look around anymore. Pomu took a few steps back, crouching slightly and staring at me from the side. The flashes of red were coming more often now. Okay, I'll help you out, but if I do, you're going to have to play with me, she said. Even the audio was beginning to glitch now. Pomu's voice sounded staticky and distant. It was distorted like a radio, losing signal. A green leaf flew out of her, landing just off the ground and floating in the darkness.
Eat it, and let's get out of here.
What if I could? In frustration, I slammed my hand down on the keyboard and saw the world actually move again. After straightening up, I tested the mouse and found that I could look around too. I spun in a circle, returning to see Pomu was now permanently scarlet, her once red eyes now black and fixed on me. Whatever this glitch was, it was getting worse. I needed to eat some food and get to the surface so I could restart ASAP. I walked forward, the leaf disappearing inside my avatar. I opened the inventory, clicked through the dirt blocks, and brought them into my hand. It was an odd object, the name of which appeared on my screen as just broken characters. Among all the issues plaguing my game today, this was the least of my worries. Pomu approached me slowly, looking up and down between the leaf and me. I right-clicked the leaf, a loud squelching sound playing instead of the usual munch. It was like biting into a fruit oozing with thick liquid, and it got louder with each slurp. I tore my headset off due to the sheer volume, but still heard the repulsive noise all around me. All at once I felt a tingling in my extremities like pins and needles. Rolling back in my chair, I tried to stand but ended up falling forward on my desk, forearms crashing hard into the keyboard. All of my body was on fire now as I struggled to hold back tears. In my blurring vision, I saw my fingers fuse together, becoming one solid mass. I didn't feel them closing, but watched in horror as the separation between them faded to a simple black line that looked drawn on. Then they curled, joints snapping, fists contracting into perfect cubes. The metal of my arms cracked, almost shattering as my whole body morphed. The flesh of my torso pulled taut, bones and organs painfully distended as they settled into their new form. Screaming, I tried to look down, only to find that I no longer had a neck. My head rotated stiffly, taking in what I had become. As I rotated my arms, I felt them bend at the shoulders, one solid mass moving in tandem. My already stiff hips snapped up, each of my legs forming one solid structure. My ankles had swollen to the size of my feet and now became one flat surface that met the ground like a hoof. Looking forward once more, I saw the form of Pomu return to her usual green and white. The world of Shovelforge expanded in my vision, drawing me forward as my arms pushed off the desk and I stood straight up. She approached me, that blank expression creeping closer in the firelight. Desperately, I struggled to scream once more, but felt no movement. My lips had already disappeared from my face. I couldn't even blink my eyes, forced to stand there in silence as Pomu walked around me once before staring into them. My consciousness began to fade, panic replaced with a desire to mine and craft for as long as I could.
Are you ready to play?
She asked. I fought to twist my head from side to side, to express the terror and torment that I was experiencing. In the end, only one sound came from my solid form.
I'm Pomu.
I woke up the next morning, screaming as I shot out of bed. It took me a full minute gasping for air in the corner of the room before I finally came to my senses and grabbed at different parts of my body. They were all there. Fingers, hands, neck, joints. I worked my way through each body part, confirming that they could move and touching them one by one. A pain chuckle gargled out of my throat. When had I gone to bed? It felt like I hadn't eaten or drunk anything in days. I wiped the drenched hair out of my face, braced myself on the wall for support. I'd never had a dream affect me so viscerally. Everything hurt like I'd run a marathon right before bed. Now that I calmed down, I felt the exhaustion hit me. Breakfast would be good. Then maybe back to bed. I made it halfway out of the room before I heard an unusual sound. Look, look. It was coming from the closet I streamed games out of. I pushed open the door and saw Shovel Forge taking up a full screen. I went to grab the mouse but froze with my arm outstretched, realizing the game was somehow playing itself. My first-person perspective was mining blocks and building some sort of building on the land he flattened. Then my eyes were drawn to the bottom left corner of the screen, watching the text box continuously flood with words that were never sent to the server. He was begging for it to stop, screaming for help, asking for an end to the game, crying out in anguish without being able to send the message. I stared in disbelief for several moments as the text box continued to fill endlessly with vivid descriptions of the agony I had experienced in my dream. I ripped the power cord out of the back of the CPU, barely preventing myself from collapsing there and then. I uninstalled Shovel Forge the next day when I finally had the courage to turn my PC back on. I'll never again touch that game. I still feel shivers whenever I see a screenshot or clip of others playing it. None of that has stopped the other Nijisanji members from complimenting me on all the structures I've built on the server. They always say, it's like you never rest. I just laugh it off and change the subject. But I think they're right. I don't think he'll ever find a way out of the game. The end.